morning, everyone, and welcome to this latest session of the Indica Books Writers Open House with Otis. And we use this and we provide this opportunity for aspiring writers and authors to write small pieces and submit them to Otis and get feedback from him on the short piece. Approximately 800 to 1,000 words is what we recommend be the length of that piece. And when we meet typically on Sundays, we go over those pieces. Otis will share his feedback on the story, book review, or whatever writing piece that you've submitted, as well as we use this to have a discussion on the aspects of writing, improving the writing, and the art and craft of writing. So this is typically held on 8 p.m. on Sundays, India time. And you can visit the Indica website for more information on how to register for this, how to submit your pieces. And this is open to everyone who subscribes to so this is meant for Indic writers. So if you subscribe to the Indic point of view, I won't call it ideology, but if you subscribe to the Indic point of view, do use this opportunity to send in your piece. And with that, I will turn this over to Otis.
It's like it's like a worldview, right? Sort of kind of. I mean, it's not that it's absolutely rigid, but it's a kind of worldview.
Right, and there are. So it's not that we mandate that anyone sending a writing piece necessarily write about Indic themes, but we do expect that, given that we are making this available to aspiring writers at essentially no charge, no cost, that they do take a minute or two to go over the Indic ethos, which is available on the Indica website. And if you think you are comfortable with it, I don't think there's anything objectionable in it, but of course we leave that choice to you. And if you think you subscribe to it, then by all means send in a writing piece. And Otis, as I said, he reviews it, he sends his feedback, and then we use the session to go over that and to essentially learn from each other, as well as gently rib Otis about the lessons he keeps trying to drill into us every week.
Yes, a little pushback. Maybe I should read those comments, but so far it seems like I've been okay, so maybe if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's a good rule. Okay, let's talk about Annika's piece. I guess Abhinav, you're saying that she's not here, but you'll see the recording, and this was from a couple of weeks ago, so I'm not I don't remember it exactly. It's not exactly fresh in my mind, but I think I have a few comments, and I do remember what my overall impression was. So let's do that. And then Mridula, if I'm saying that correctly, is here, and I have a piece from her also that we can talk about. So I'm sharing this with you now. This is a review. And I think that this review is solid. Abhinav, this is your daughter. About how old is she? What? I can't hear. I lost you.
Now?
Oh yeah, now I can.
Yeah, something with the Bluetooth. So I was saying she's 15.
15. Wow. So yeah, so I think she's 15. She's writing very well. And I think, this is my general feeling about writing and teaching writing, is that the more we do, the better. It's not even the more we do, the better we get, because there isn't some place of arrival. There's, as Yoda says, there's do and not do. And that's it. Like you keep working on your sentences, and like you keep having a relationship with creating these words and putting them on the page, and that expands your capability of doing it. And I think that right now she's clearly, it seems to me, a person who has been encouraged to write. What happens to most people is they actually get sort of forbidden from writing. I mean, this was actually my experience. You know, we get criticized, we get told that we're not doing it right, we get all these sort of negative roadblocks to our expression. And if that has happened to us in our educational experience, then we have to overcome that, which I've sort of spent a lifetime trying to do. I would say that Annika has actually been, quite well encouraged to write. I mean, I can see it in the easy flow of her language, and all is good. So the key then is to do whatever you can not to mess that up. I mean, that's the only thing you have to do. It's like, do not mess that up. Continue to create these opportunities, continue to write. The comments, from my part, I mean, have to absolutely be, gentle, because, you don't, it's writing is about flow and creating that in your life and accessing the muse, or whatever you want to call it, that divine inspiration that helps you put the words on the page. Everything else follows from that. So in this piece, I think this is nice. After saying all that, I'm going to be nitpicky about just this first sentence. And it's funny. We're often like this when we start writing, before we really train ourselves to just. I mean, it's very hard to just drop in. I forget. It's the attribution for this quote is not exactly clear. People say different things, but it's a quote that I like very much. Some writer said, "Writing is easy. You just open a vein." I love that quote. I think that is dead on accurate. However, of course, opening a vein is not necessarily easy. How do you do that? And so, I think we see that a little bit in this first sentence, but then it actually just starts moving along. So if we look at a sentence like this, to say I'm not the biggest fan of the YA genre would be a fairly accurate statement. That's kind of a curly Q sort of sentence. And I think it's better just to try and be as direct as possible, to say I'm not a fan of the YA genre. In YA books, I find the romance often overwhelms the actual plot, just to get it to be a little bit more direct. In the beginning of pieces, this is just a belief system I have. I think it's great to be direct. If a reader picks it up and they don't like what you're saying directly, they don't want to read what you're putting forward, then I think that's fine. They choose not to. So we'll just be direct and let them make the choices. Hold on 1 second. My partner and older daughter are in Florida, and so my younger daughter is just here, and so I thought I heard her, but I don't think so. Okay, so that's just a small comment, just to jump in and be direct, but it's very common for us writers to sort of feel around the first paragraph. I've had the experience many, many times. Abhinav, you could probably chime in, I'm sure many of us could, where I've reworked the first paragraph for, I don't know how many hours, right? 10 hours, 20, and then in the end, you give it to a workshop and someone marks should start here. And it's down, that paragraph is gone and all that work is gone. It's not gone though. It's work that we had to do.
Right. And what I'll share is that in my experience, it is very difficult to read my own piece as for the first time. But for someone who's going to be actually reading it for the first time, the first line and the first couple of sentences are the ones that will probably have the biggest, may leave the biggest impression on the reader. So therefore, it becomes all that more important to get those first few lines absolutely right. In my mind, when I'm writing, I know that yes, this is fantastic, but just bear with for the first page, for the first couple of pages or so. But that's not how the reader is going to be viewing, the first line and or the first page.
Right. I think that what we need to do in the beginning is we need to get the reader in. So like there's this moment, what we call the willing suspension of disbelief, where the reader is the reader and this is writing, and they're basically two different things. And we have this moment where the reader says they're going to buy in or they're not, essentially. So I think we want them to buy in right away. Establish point of view, establish setting, those two things combined, establish the conflict if you can. And actually this sentence basically does that. I don't like YA, I don't like that genre. So it establishes a conflict between the person who's writing the review and the book itself. And so that actually sets up a nice expectation for the reader. So we just want to get to that clearly. Just jump in. Don't beat around the bush, as we said. And then I just had a short comment. I think that, a lot of the book is summarized, but I don't think we really want to summarize too much of the book. We want to leave that experience. We might want to say something about the characters, about the essential plot line, but I think we usually leave most of the summarizing for the reader to experience themselves when they read it, because our summary should not be as good as the book itself. We might make a comment about the writing. And then there's a couple great lines here. Yes, I mean, your daughter is clearly familiar with some literary terms and the construction of stories. So I like that. I like the typical YA tropes, the death of a parent. I mean, this is something that me and my daughters joke about quite a lot. Oh, it's a dead mother story. Oh, it's a dead father story. Oh, it's a dead both parents story. Oh, it's not a dead parent story yet, but now it is, depending on when it all happens. Yeah, I mean, I'm enjoying a lot of this. And then I just had to comment at the end that here it says, for readers of the YA genre, this is a must read. For those who have hesitated, but I think it would be great if she could comment for other readers. So when it comes to publishing, basically you have books, publishers are looking at books in certain ways. Does it fulfill what they want the book to fulfill? So if it's a YA book, is it going to gather the YA audience that they typically get? Is it going to steal? Hear myself, that might be from you, Abhinav. So, or is it going to take, so like every publisher knows how many books they sold the year before. So now this is their new book. Is it going to sell the same number? That's their first question. Second, is it going to steal YA readers from other publishers? Are they going to be able to gather more YA readers here? And then next, is it going to steal readers of other genres? Is it going to take adult readers? Is it going to take, maybe younger audience readers? Is it going to take readers of literary fiction? Is it going to take readers of nonfiction? Is it basically going to break out of its genre? That is really, these are the questions I think that publishers are asking themselves. And so I think that a review can try and discuss that a little bit. Because when you're writing a review, in theory, you're maybe communicating to all readers. So you may be suggesting this book, it's a YA book, but readers of literary fiction will enjoy it. Or it's a YA book, but readers of science fiction will also enjoy it, etc. So I think that that's a comment that can be made. And right. I think the appropriateness of the book is probably important too, since it's YA. I think that you're going to have parents reading the review, buying the book for the kid, so like understanding that kind of like how the commerce works a little bit can help us as a reviewer. but I think that's it. I think it's a wonderful review.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much, Otis. I'll share this with her probably tomorrow, or whenever she gets off her tests. But this is great. Thank you.
Okay, great. Ridley, maybe you can. Let's look at this piece. Hi, how are you?
Okay, how are you? Can you hear me?
So, Mridana, your video has or had frozen for a couple of seconds. We couldn't hear you. So, do you want to try again?
Yeah, I'm all right. Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. Great to see you. Thanks for coming and thanks for submitting this work. So I'm not, I can't remember if I'm not sure if you've attended before, so I'm sorry about that. But anyway, what we usually do, you've submitted some work, and I usually have the author talk about it a little bit. Oh, there we go. I need to wake up. Like the author to talk about it a little bit, set it up a little bit, and then read a little section, and then we'll talk about it. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about this piece. I mean, it's partially because we don't all read the pieces like we would in a normal workshop. So it's a way to sort of catch up everyone else.
So actually, I've been here before. I think I'm just submitting after a really long time, so that's why you don't remember me, but that's okay. So I'll just quickly walk you through certain things that I was thinking when I was writing this piece. I just want to very quickly confirm another thing before I do that. Can you hear me properly?
Sorry, the audio is a little hard for me to understand right now.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I hear you very well. Maybe talk a little bit slower, and then run me through that again.
Right. I'm so sorry. Actually, I think there is some problem with my internet connection. So that's the thing to blame. What I was saying was that I've been here before, but I'm just submitting after a really long time. So that's why perhaps you don't remember me. Anyway, so I'll just walk you through the piece that I've written here. So essentially, I was very interested in talking about a certain fight that had emerged in the locality where I live. It was between two people. It was a very small financial thoughts. And it was very interesting for many reasons, but I also didn't want to write an entire story on it due to, well, many reasons. So what I did was I decided to think of a story within a story, which is why the fight which has been alluded to here, the fight between Shanti auntie and Vidya auntie, is that's the central aspect of the entire story. But I know the sample that I've shared, the very short one, also just focuses on the background that leads to that particular the central part of it. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Maybe you could read a little bit. Let's see. So let's see if I can do this. So we sort of have the space seems to be maybe one or two rooms, an apartment, and we have right here we have the father, I think the father, the mother, the brother, and the protagonist who is writing the story are all together. So maybe you could read. I'm making some marks here. If you could read between those. Sorry, I'm gonna try and I'll move it up when we get to it. If you could read between those two marks that I've made, that would be great.
Yeah, sure.
This is the father starting.
Yeah. He continues, "What are you writing though? College homework? I'm planning to submit it for a workshop in Bombay. They're asking for entries." He pauses, then smiles. "I'm sure you'll get in. They've rejected my application 2 times in a row, actually." A few seconds later, he guffaws, "Rejected 2 times in a row? That's new for you." I don't smile because it's not funny. Ha ha, I managed to say. Android intervenes. Lol Didi, rejected choice seems like an impossible mission. Father and son have their moment. I let them enjoy. Enough. I clear my throat and interrupt my humiliation. This story is about the Vidya auntie incident. I think they might finally select me this year. That story is pure gold. Father is no longer reading the newspaper now. I pick up a starched napkin and clean my lips to get rid of the remnants of jam on the brink of my lips. He starts. So, nothing from Shanti Auntie's perspective then? I can add that I don't want to exceed the word limit, can't risk it. He nods and shifts his focus to the newspaper again. Android intervenes. I've read her story. She's critiquing Shanti Auntie. She's also used abusive words. I notice a smug smile on his stupid face. I stammer, no, no, nothing like that, nothing serious, relax. Father calls mother. She appears confused, apprehensive. Father summarizes my agenda and the lecture begins. She starts, how many times have we told you to not write against Shanti Auntie? You know that we support her, right? Her son has just died, have some shame. And you know that her husband is very powerful, father implores. He drinks at Starbucks.
Okay, great, thank you. So I don't know what is happening with Shanti Auntie. I understand that that's a story that is causing a kind of rift, whether that should be exposed or that story should be written about or not in this sort of public forum. I think that that's interesting. And I love this line that, and do you know her husband is very powerful, he drinks at Starbucks, and there's a little riff that goes on after that about Starbucks and who drinks at Starbucks and who doesn't drink at Starbucks. And I enjoyed that too. I really like this world. I like this world very much. I mean, I understand it as not being totally familiar to me. So I enjoy that part of it. And also these characters I feel are really alive. They really get on the page right away. So I like that. They're all different. They're distinguished from each other. They're interacting with each other. And all of that is really involving. I mean, I'm reading this and I actually feel that I'm there. That is a huge accomplishment. I think the main thing that I thought in this piece was it's not really focused in the traditional way around the protagonist's actions. So she's sort of there in the center, but she's in a way not really doing anything. Like she's not really an active person. Things are happening around her, and in her point of view, in a sense, she's just recording them, right? And we just get them on the page. So we're getting the information through her point of view. It's getting onto the page, but it has a kind of, it might be hard to kind of conceptualize, but it's kind of formless. So a story generally forms, the sense of a story generally forms with establishing a protagonist and antagonistic conflict in which the protagonist makes a choice to engage in a certain kind of action. So now this action is the thing that kind of gives a sense of form to the story as we move forward. It's like the cohesive element of the story. Without that, basically, I don't know what the story is. I mean, that's a kind of a weird thing to say because it seems like, well, the story is on the page, it's all this typing. But in another, like in a psychological sense, I don't know what's driving the story. I don't know what I'm paying attention to. I don't have these fundamental things established, like what is going to happen. If there's a conflict, I wonder what's going to happen. And then I also understand, usually early on, why it's important to the main character, which makes it so that I also care. So those are some things that I'm kind of not seeing. I'm seeing a lot of things that are being done really well. When I was reading this, I was sort of reminded of one of the first stories that I submitted. When I decided I was going to be a writer, I went to a workshop and I wrote a story that was, to me, I thought it was a work of genius. I've been teaching high school already. I read all the Russian realists. I understood symbolism, everything. So I just, it was 16 pages, single spaced, dense. It was moody. It was dark. It was all these things. And I gave it to this very famous writer at this writer's workshop. His name was Barry Hannah. I could tell more stories about him. And his single comment on it was, "This meanders like a drunk on a bender." That was his comment. It was very witty, I thought, but it struck me in the heart. And he basically said, every now and then he was writing, "Where is the story?" Basically meaning, what's driving the story? He wrote that many times. And it hurt me very much so. But I took his comments to heart. And actually, I took his comments to heart. And out of that sort of little conference that we had, I wrote another story. It was just a 1-week workshop, I think. I wrote another story in 2 days. That was just a very simple story about a character or protagonist who wanted something. And the story was not about him getting it, because that's not what stories are about. Stories are about characters wanting something and not getting it. So I wrote that simple story and he liked it. And I used that simple story to get into the University of Arkansas, where I did my MFA. And everything else from there. So like, I really learned this lesson of like this sort of difference between sort of putting life on the page, which I think is what I did in the first story. That was so important to me, being able to express that. This is life on the page. I want to reveal it. As opposed to constructing a story that creates a protagonist in a world of antagonism, who then decides to pursue something, who wants something and pursues it. And I think through that experience, I understood this sort of, it's kind of like the metaphysical idea of a story, right? So there's life. I mean, life and stories are not the same. There's life, which is kind of formless and kind of chaotic, perhaps. And then there's a story that has an absolute form to it. It has a kind of metaphysical form that's driven by this character want. So I think that that's something that I'd like to see here. Like I would love to see a construction here of this character wanting something and pursuing getting it, to give me that sense of form.
Right.
But I think it's a good start. I would probably suggest not being so fancy, like writing a story within a story. That's, yes, Shakespeare did it, right? He had to play within the play, and it's a kind of standardized literary form, but it's not as active, right? So like, if you have this character who's like, what does she want? She wants to publish a story. It's kind of not as active as, say, there's in Bonnie and Clyde, Bonnie wants money, right? And she robs a bank. That's very tangible. It's right on the page and we can understand it very viscerally. However, wanting a story is a little bit less tangible, wanting the success of a story, wanting whatever is associated with it. So I might suggest trying to make it a little bit more concrete and physical. But I think it's a great start. I love this world. I love these characters. There's, I think the way the family is, maybe you could say is not great, but I feel like it's real. Like the father slaps the son for not doing something, and I like the way it's handled in this story. It's just part of the life. It's just accepted. It's not judged. I like that too. Those are my comments. Yeah.
Mridula, if you have questions, please go ahead. I have one or two questions of my own.
Yeah.
So I think I just wanted to clarify one thing. In this context,
Your volume is your sound is coming a little muffled, Mridula. If you want to speak louder or switch to a different mic.
Right. Can you hear me now?
Oh yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Actually, so when I was thinking about, detailing the fight in this story, I realized during the process of writing that it's really hard to just stick to one subject, as this argument between a certain person and parents are going on, because what happens is the moment you start an argument, it just keeps on going into different directions. So even when the father calls the mother because he's upset at the fact that his daughter is writing a particular story, right, it just keeps on moving on to different subjects. I mean, one of the secondary subsections of this entire conflict would be the fact that she's written um, something that's abusive. So there's some ambiguity regarding that, something about Starbucks, something about this and that. So I was just wondering, in such a scenario, if you really want to stick to talking about how a fight typically isn't just about one thing, it ends up becoming about too many things. In that instance, how is it that we can give more agency to the protagonist and make her much more involved in the process? What can we do to make sure that she's not simply responding to things happening around her?
Mm-hmm.
And another thing was, do you think it would help if this was written in the third person? I'm still having a lot of trouble thinking about how exactly that would work, because the I here is slightly important to me. But do you think that may perhaps solve certain problems? Yeah, these would be the two questions.
Okay, let me try and say something about that. I guess I would start by saying that I actually don't think that there's really a significant difference between writing in first person and third person, or even second person, or first person plural, or any of those things, because the central issue is creating a protagonist that has some sense of wanting something ahead. They're trying to make the world their own. They're trying, in a sense, to control the world, where the antagonistic force is trying to prevent them from controlling the world. That also then speaks to this other thing you were talking about, the argument. And again, I think I'm saying this again, but like the argument that's unfolding here, I think you're accurately expressing the way an argument takes place. So I feel like that this is an accurate depiction of this world, and I feel like I'm involved in this world, and I think that is an accomplishment. I guess I'm trying to make the argument that that's not a story, in a sense. Like when Barry Hanna looked at my work and he said, this meanders like a drunk on a bender. And he said, and he's writing in the margin, where's the story? What he's trying to say is, where's the protagonist's motivation? Where's the protagonist's drive? What are they trying to do that the reader understands? I both understand what they're trying to do, and I also understand, in a way, why they're trying to do it. In stories, that's generally what they're trying to do is misdirected. It's not on the nose. It's not, so like Bonnie, right? In Bonnie and Clyde, Bonnie is poor, right? She doesn't have the respect of the community, the society, because of her poverty. She meets Clyde, who is a grifter and a con man, and he convinces her to come away with him, and then they go on to rob banks. We understand what she is doing, right, which is robbing banks. We also understand that she doesn't realize why she's doing it, right? But she's doing it because she wants respect. She thinks that she will gain respect through having money. And the way to do that is to rob the banks. However, at the end, that's not the case. She's never going to have any respect because she's robbed banks and has that money. She'll always be treated the same by the society. But she finds something else. She wanted to be accepted by society, but instead she finds that she's accepted by Clyde. And she also accepts Clyde, and they find love with each other, right? So a story is, you know, as the Rolling Stones would say, you don't get what you want, right? But you do get what you need. That is the classic form of story. So the solution here is that, yeah, I don't think you're going to get that out of this argument. I mean, I think the argument, you know, writing this argument is great, and it's a great, you know, you're delving into these characters and you're capturing these characters, but there's another level of construction that I think you should consider, which is what I did. So between that story that meandered like a drunk on a bender, which I'll say that Barry Hannah would know about since he was an infamous drunk, between that story and the story I wrote, the only difference was really that the new story that I wrote in just a few days had a character who wanted something. It was a fairly simple story. It was based a little bit on my brother who was institutionalized. And it's about a character who gets out of the institution, and he doesn't want to be seen as a person who's been institutionalized. And he feels like the way to do that is to find a girlfriend. Okay, so he goes in pursuit of finding a girlfriend. That's it. 15 pages of this guy who came out of an institution trying to get a date, basically. That's it. Very simple. Does he get the date? No, he does not. Does he get recognized as being not part of the institution? No, he doesn't. Does it end happily? Not so much. But in my mind, right, it's basically very simple. Having that simple construction at the beginning of your story is very helpful because we can put a lot of different words on the page, and we need something that organizes what words those are. And all those words need to basically bear in on the story itself. They can't be words that are about something else, about Starbucks here, about Shanti Auntie there. It's not going to be about any of those things. It's all about what the character wants and them trying to get it. That's the center of the story. It makes sense because we're like, if you look at, you know, anything that's written, right, it's just a bunch of words. So how do we make it have form? We make it have form by having a very strong intention for the work. And that requires our basically conceptualizing that intention and then making it happen on the page. Even then, you're going to find it's hard to control. Even then, it's hard to control. So you have to really try and be strict. I was so desperate. But when I went to the workshop to have some success, I was so humiliated at my lack of success and so desperately wanted success that I basically said, I think Barry Hannah is an idiot and he knows nothing, but I'm going to go ahead and do what he's asking for, God damn it, so that I can succeed in this workshop and not be humiliated again. It's incredible, but it worked a little bit. It wasn't a great story then, right? And I actually finally published that story maybe 4 or 5 years later after a lot of work to make it better, right? Did I? Yeah, I did publish that story. But anyway, I did a lot of work on it to publish that story. So it wasn't a great story in the beginning. It's not my best story or any of that, but it was at least this thing that was recognizable as a story that could be felt by the reader as a story. And that's actually, I think, the key ingredient is the reason that we're focusing on this protagonist and the reason that we're focusing on their struggle to accomplish what they want is because that's something that every reader in the world can identify with, because everyone in the world wants things and they struggle to get them, and then they don't. And that becomes the connection between the protagonist and the reader, which is that protagonist is basically then here, because what's also being connected is the reader and the author, right? The author, through the protagonist, connects to the reader. But if we don't have that protagonist, then we also do not have that connection. I don't like it. I do not like that. My greatest work was that first work that Barry Hannah said meandered like a drunk on a bender, and he said, "Where's the story?" That has been my one single greatest work, probably, I think. But no one's going to read it. Because what we're finally looking for as authors is to connect up with the reader. And to do that, we need this vehicle, basically, you know, an avatar that we create that they then can inhabit. And that is the place where we meet. I like your character here. I like your central protagonist, and I like these secondary characters too. I think that they're all interesting. They all have their passions, for sure. And work with them, or take your protagonist. And if that's a protagonist that's, you know, somewhat like yourself, that's great. That's definitely where I started, you know, and I think that's a good place to start, because not that we necessarily know ourselves, but we at least know our point of view, right? So, Abhinav, did you have a question too?
Yes, this is more a general question. So let's, when your story has multiple characters that will play, you know, significant roles in your book, and how do you introduce those characters? There's one school of thought that says, you know, introduce each character separately, so that, or at least where they get, where the reader gets to understand and get a view as to something about what you know, the character's mental makeup is, what the personality is, and all. Another option is, you know, you take an opening chapter and you throw in all the characters and then sort them out through the remaining chapters of the book, and so on. How does one do that? Because on the one hand, you know, the second approach is where you end up, or you risk it confusing the reader. Okay, there are 8 characters in there. Which one do I pay attention to? Who's doing what? Or how does one relate to the other? With the first approach, then the risk is that you end up testing the reader's patience, because they're waiting, okay, when will all the introductions to the characters get over? Is this contributing to the story? I don't see the story moving forward. What is the story? So that's one, you know, basic doubt that I have.
Well, I think that you're sort of highlighting something. So, I mean, this is in a sense a crowd scene. So it's very hard to organize. I mean, that's, you know, I think writing is about, you know, when we put something forward in our writing, we want to emphasize our strengths and we want to omit our weaknesses. Okay, so understanding what's more difficult to do and what's less difficult to do is important for us. For one, so crowd scenes are incredibly difficult to do because they can seem diffuse, and we don't want diffuse. Keep it simple, right? They say, just keep it simple. I mean, I'm going to go back to that story that I wrote for Barry Hannah, the simple one. I was like, I was in a situation I wanted to get out of. I wanted to go to an MFA program. I needed to have success. I felt bad about myself. I wanted people to laud praise upon me. I wanted all these things. So I needed to write a story that was going to be good enough for that to happen. I needed Barry Hannah to say, this is a good story. That's what I needed, right? So I just kept it simple. Keep it simple. Just about one guy wanting something. He looks in a plant store and there's a girl in the plant store. He's like, oh, I want to ask her out. So then he goes in to buy a plant. That doesn't happen right away. He goes away first, then he comes back to buy a plant, right? Right, that's it. Just keep it simple. I do think Abhinav about this more. I wouldn't get too worked up about it, like how to do it, but I don't think you want to throw a bunch of characters on there without having a story. My feeling is we need to have the dynamic action taking place. So we need to have the character, the protagonist needs to get on the page, and the antagonistic force needs to get on the page. One of the best, so that we can understand the conflict, and then we need to understand why it's a conflict. One of the best examples of this is ZZ Packer's story published in the New Yorker called Drinking Coffee Elsewhere. All of us could stand to read the first sentence of that story and tell me, come back and tell me, why it works. Read the second sentence of that story and tell me why it works. Read the first paragraph and tell me why it works. Forget about the rest of the story. Forget about the rest. Just that. How do you get that reader in the very beginning? And she's doing it right. The New Yorker is not wrong to publish ZZ Packer. I was lucky enough to be in a workshop with her and so thankfully read her, right? She's doing it right. When she does it right, why would we do it some other way? I mean, wouldn't I be an idiot to say, well, no, I'm going to do it my own way and then expect a different, expect the same result? No, I'm not going to get it. She puts the character, let's see if I can reproduce a sentence. Orientation games began the day I arrived at Yale from Baltimore.
I remember that. You had mentioned that, and I had read that piece, and yes, that's the first line of that piece. It's very, very striking.
And you know what that story is about? Orientation. It's the first word. So I've been trying to write a sentence like that as my first sentence from then on. Then the first game we played was Trust, where I was supposed to fall backwards into the scrawny arms of some boy genius. That's her second line. Why is that important? Because we understand what her internal issue is. What is her internal issue? Her internal struggle? Trust. What is the external struggle? ZZ Packer character protagonist, she did go to Yale, so a very close approximation, and she did come from Baltimore, so a very close approximation of ZZ Packer, arriving Black from Baltimore, arriving at basically lily white Yale, right? She's been accepted there, but she doesn't trust it. That's the external conflict. And what's the internal conflict? Trust. Being able to trust based on her past and the circumstance that she finds herself in. Okay, I'm sorry. We may or may not want to write about a ZZ Packer type character in Yale or not. It is a great story. It is classically written. It then alternates basically through a construction between an external conflict, her relationship with another girl, and an internal conflict that's represented by her being forced to see the school counselor and talk about her problems. So we have, and they just go back and forth. External conflict, her and this girl, and they're developing relationship, which is going to push this idea of trust. And then this other relationship with the counselor in which the character explores her past which is exploring the internal conflict of why she does not trust. And they go 1, 2, A story, B story, A story, B story, A story, B story, until they culminate at the end. Why would I do something different than that? I think I dropped off your question though. The second part of this is a subset of what you're bringing up, Abhinav. So for me, the way I deal with characters is I only deal with characters when they are actually physically on the page. That's number one. So I don't have two characters talk about another character who's going to arrive. No. There's two reasons for that. Because when they talk about a character that's not there, that is abstract. I do not want anything that's abstract in any sentence that I'm working on. I always want it to be as concrete as possible. Because if you have characters talking about something that's abstract, that's another level of abstraction. I've said this before, in writing, we already have a single level of abstraction, right? We have the signified, which are actual things, and the signifier, which are the words for those. So that is a level of abstraction. But now if we're talking about ideas or things that are off the page or another level of, what is it, immateriality? I don't know. But anyway, it's another level of abstraction. And we're already dealing with, we're dealing with something as uninteresting as this. This is not interesting. It's not as interesting as a tree, as a lion, as a cat, as it's not even as interesting as the dishes in my sink. So we need to make it as concrete as possible. When I'm thinking about characters on the page, I always want to create the conflict between those who are on the page. We can think of it like a stage, because we as writers, we're dramatists. We're not fancy, we're not philosophers. Okay, please don't think you're a philosopher. Okay, I was lucky to realize I'm not that smart. Okay, I'm not smart enough to be a philosopher. I'm a dramatist. So like the stage, our page is like the stage. We can have a bunch of characters, but two of them come forward. The action is on them. This is where the dynamic is. This is where the conflict is. This is where the engagement is. When I need my protagonist to move on to another antagonist, I have them move on to that other protagonist. Oh, sorry, my protagonist to the other antagonist. ZZ Packer's story, she has one line, the A story, in which the character, the protagonist, the ZZ-like character, is dealing with this girl who's the antagonist. The girl trusts ZZ. The girl wants to be trusted by ZZ. Sorry, the character. I forget the character's name. Dana, I think. Then we have a scene in which the protagonist meets the counselor, the psychologist. That's where the action is. That's where the conflict is. He wants her to reveal her problems. She does not want to reveal her problems. She does not trust him. Then we go back here, the conflict again in the A story, the conflict in the B story. I go back to keep it simple. Keep it simple. We can put, how many words are at our disposal? And we can write any single one at any time. So what controls what we do? What controls what words we put on the page? It has to be something that we construct for ourselves. And we should make that construction as simple and as direct as possible, because it is so easy for us to go astray. We've all come here because we love language. We all have much more training in abstract thinking than we do in dramatizing. Human beings universally respond so much better to dramatization than they do to abstraction, because we are physical people who exist in the world. We're not, in Gulliver's Travels, what were the people, I can't say the names of them, but they hover above the world, you know, up here. We're much more Lilliputian. We're Lilliputians down here. We're not these people that are up here in reality. So anyway, my point is, it's hard for us. We've all been trained in coming up with answers, right? We've all been trained in, who has the right answer? Who's doing the best thinking? Who can do this, that, and the other thing? We've all been trained in that. And yet that's not what we're being called upon at all to write a story. We're being called upon to write the human drama of wanting and not getting. Which is, I mean, it's so, to me, it's been so exciting to recognize that. I mean, I did not come into this as a dramatist. I came into writing as a person with my mother's idea of a story was, those were difficult years. That's it. That's all she'd tell me. So I did not come from a storytelling background. My parents were both scientists. They did not ever tell a story, I don't think, either of them. They would rather quote math equations to me. So I've had to learn it. But we all do, because this is not the way our education normally is. I mean, unless you've been fortunate enough to be part of a theater family or something like that. We do not think about dramatization, but that's what we do as storytellers. And we do it not because we want to, but because it works to get that connection with an audience. And we don't get to say all the things that we want to say, and we don't get to tell the audience to think all the things that we think. This is our, I want to say our Faustian bargain. It's like, damn you, when do I get to tell everyone what to think? Sorry, doesn't happen. That's the end of my speech. Jay, how are you?
Hi, Otis. I'm really good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Where are you located?
Still in Belarus.
Still in Belarus. How are things there?
They're all right as of now, but there is still a military operation happening next door. So we're keeping our fingers crossed. We're sitting tight. So.
Okay. Any other questions from anyone?
In case not, then we can break. We can break a little early. And again, I know there are people who have submitted pieces but have not been able to join for one or the other reason. Hopefully, they will join next Sunday. If you have sent a piece, you have not received any feedback from Otis, do drop him a reminder. Do send him an email and attach or reattach that piece so that it comes up to the top of his inbox. And do send in a writing pieces, 800 words, 800 to 1,000 words. It can be a book review, it can be a fiction, it can be a non-fiction piece. There are details available on the Indica website, and keep writing.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone for being here. Always great to see you all.
Thank you.